Well, good morning. Breakfast at the Broker every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We have a very special episode because we're at Pod Populi, a podcast studio, and we have a very special guest as well. So, without further ado, and now, by way of Boca Raton, Florida, he is the executive director at South Florida Regional Transportation Authority, Tri-Rail. He's the former mayor of the city of Boca Raton. He studied law at George Washington University. He's a former law clerk to President Reagan. He's a father, a son, a lover of planes, trains, and automobiles. Stand up and make some noise for Steven L Abrams.
Good morning, David, and I only hope I can live up to that hype.
Well, good morning. Well, listen, you've been a fixture in the community for a while, and I certainly have seen a lot of things that you've been doing, and tell us a little bit about the transportation in South Florida, specifically, with Tri-Rail and such.
Well, for those of us who live in South Florida and have been living here for some time, and of course, even for recent residents, we know that our highways are packed, our roads are full, and we're now, in fact, in South Florida, the fourth largest urbanized area in the country after New York, LA, and Chicago. And so mobility has uh, risen as a significant issue for the public, not only so they can get to work and to school, but so that goods can be transported. We hear so much about the supply chain, and our economy can function. And in addition to that, here in South Florida, we are, as we know, ground zero for climate change and sea level rise. And so increasingly, transit options are taking on greater significance for our area.
So, what's the direction of Tri-Rail? And just kind of looking at it, for whatever reason, there's been some negative connotation to it or whatever. But I mean, I took it the other about a year ago, and it went directly into the Miami airport. It's the most convenient thing that you could possibly do. You get in the Tri-Rail, you go directly into Miami terminal. You don't have to press go. You collect your 200 and leave. Um, so tell us a little bit about the direction of Tri-Rail and such.
Well, really, the only complaints that I hear are we need to have more trains more frequently, later in the evening, uh, and and maybe some nicer trains. All of which we're seeking to address, but all of which uh, rely on funding. We are a public transit agency, and we don't. When one thing I miss from my days at City Hall and in the county is we do not have our own taxing authority. So we are reliant on our funding partners, which are the three counties that we serve: Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade, as well as the Florida Department of Transportation. But yes, I tout our connections to the airports as one of our best features. We connect to all three airports, but as you mentioned, practically directly into the terminal at Miami, which gives so many more options to folks in Broward and Palm Beach counties to have convenient flights and cheaper flights out of Miami, which you really would not otherwise consider if you lived in Boca Raton or Palm Beach County and had to drive all the way down to Miami International Airport.
So we'll talk about a little bit of funding. And I was at a community 101 in North Palm Beach with Commissioner Marino, and she was discussing. And it was put on by the Broward, Palm Beach, and St. Lucie Realtors Association, and and she was talking about a transportation tax that may be coming, because the funding for Tri-Rail, as you said, is relying on the three counties, and people don't realize that, like, yeah, you want to put stations on every corner, but it costs money. Tell us a little bit about that, and is it that difficult? I mean, are you looking at private funds too, or just the public funds?
Well, Commissioner Marino, by the way, our immediate past chairman, a tremendous supporter of Tri-Rail and transportation throughout our region. Uh, and so, as a public agency, we have tried to think of ways to maximize some private funding for our operations. So, for example, we have at 4 of our 18 stations control of surrounding land, including Boca Raton, for example. And I'll use that since we're here, where South Florida Regional Transportation Authority owns 7.5 acres immediately adjacent to our station. Well, right now we're in negotiations with a developer to build a mixed use project known as a transit oriented development there at the station where we would derive rental revenues from the project, lease revenues from the project. And so that's one way that we're trying to enhance uh, private funding into our operation so that we can go ultimately to the public agencies and, as you mentioned, to the general public, perhaps in a year or so at a referendum to ask for additional funding to finally build out the commuter rail infrastructure uh, in this region.
And I think that would go a long way of, to really combat some of the negative, perceptions of what the public has about Tri-Rail, right? Because, if you put, and I think that's a great outside the box kind of thought process where you're bringing in money because you're having a transit oriented community. It obviously increases mobility and stuff like that. And to talk about mobility, so a lot of people say, well, mobility is just getting from point A to point B, but there's a lot more factors in mobility. Talk about a little bit about mobility and how it relates to Tri-Rail.
Well, when we talk about tri-rail or public transit in general and mobility, the biggest challenge is always what we call the first and last mile. So you need to get to the tri-rail station. You need to get to the bus stop. And so we're working on that piece of it, which is to provide complimentary Uber, Lyft, or taxi rides from our stations within a 2 or 3 mile radius. We have a pilot project now going on at our Cypress Creek station in Fort Lauderdale using Freebie, which is an exciting service that will be sort of the best of both worlds, an on demand shared ride to areas in Fort Lauderdale. And so we work on that first and last mile and also just making it more convenient for people to board. I always say if you just do it once and you will be a regular rider, but you have to overcome that hurdle of buying the ticket and and knowing when the trains are coming, but we're trying to make that as easy as possible with our train tracker app, where you can actually see in real time where the trains are on the corridor by uh, use being able to use your iPhone in order to purchase tickets, so you don't have to use the ticket vending machines. All that, you would think would be sort of routine in 2022, but it can be complicated, especially because we serve 3 counties to put all of that together. But in fact, we're coordinating all of that with the 3 counties in terms of ticket purchasing, et cetera, and the other things that I talked about to make it an easier trip for the average person.
So, it's interesting because you know you you have the tri-rail has been here for quite a while, and it's really been the only transit, obviously, I mean, obviously Amtrak and stuff, but bright lines come in, right? And bright lines come with the new flashy projects and the beautiful buildings and really creating a almost like a really good experience, right? It's significantly more expensive, in every way. And I understand that there's two tracks. There's the tri-rail track and then the Brightline and tri-rail, and Brightline are trying to work together or whatnot. And I won't get into that. But you know, how do you feel about like Brightline and what they're doing in order to, kind of maybe increase the mobility on almost on an express, type of service?
Well, that in fact is one of the big differences. In addition, of course, as you mentioned, to the cost, and they're considered to be an inner city passenger service. We are a commuter service, so they only stop at a handful of stations. And the key to their success, which they'll be the first to say, is to get to Orlando and beyond. Uh, Tri-Rail, on the other hand, is for the everyday worker who needs to get to their place of employment or student who needs to get to school at a much lower fare with free parking, 18 stations. So we actually stop in the neighborhoods where people live, and more frequent trains during the day. Uh, but having said that, though, we, do wish we could uh, provide the customer experience that Brightline is able to, and as I mentioned, strive to do that by uh, being able to use technology to assist our riders, and also, providing Wi-Fi on the trains and other things to make it a more uh, customer friendly, pleasurable experience for our riders. But fundamentally, they serve a different type of customer than we do. There's some overlap. I'm an example of that. I take Tri-Rail, of course, all the time, but I also will use Brightline, depending on what my needs are. But two separate systems with separate objectives.
Yeah, no, different, obviously business models and such, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I guess I will. Do you know the cost of like a monthly tri-rail pass? Is there such thing, or is it just per ride?
Yeah, no, you can buy a pass, and I'm pulling one out of my wallet for
You got a lot of money in
our
there.
viewers here. No,
Just
just
kidding.
a lot of credit
Yeah, it
cards with
looks
debt
like
on them. But
hundreds.
anyway, and it depends. You could fill them and get monthly. Have a monthly pass.
Mm.
Uh, but so I think, although Brightline is having some summer promotions, I think they're offering $10 trips, but typically they've been at a $20 price range, and our biggest ticket would be if you went from West Palm Beach to Miami, or $10. So, but typically our riders don't make that lengthy journey. They will stop, go 4 stations or so. So, it's about a $4 to $6 ride, and again with free parking. So uh, that's the significant difference. But they don't say that they're a commuter train. I mean, they would welcome riders who, and especially when we get to Boca Raton station, who would go from Boca Raton to Fort Lauderdale or Boca Raton to Miami. But typically, their overall marketing is for inner city rail throughout the state. We are working with them, though, on um, being able to, and the 3 counties, to hopefully being able to offer commuter service on their tracks. So the ultimate vision is uh, one interconnected service from our western tracks. As you mentioned, we have 2 corridors here in South Florida: the South Florida Rail Corridor, which we operate on west of 95, uh, and the FEC corridor, which they operate on paralleling Federal Highway and Dixie Highway. So we have a connection that we're finalizing in Miami-Dade County that would connect the 2 corridors. One has been constructed in West Palm Beach to connect the 2 corridors. A third is planned in Pompano Beach. But ultimately, the vision is to provide the same sort of commuter service that exists and extend that on our western tracks onto the eastern corridor. That requires their consent and, quite frankly, an access fee that they would charge for commuter rail operations to occur on their corridor.
Interesting, yeah. So now that we have trains and we have planes and automobiles, when are we going to have flying automobiles or flying trains? You know, it's it's funny how the transit and the transportation evolve and such, and a private company comes in and then makes it better, and then public transit also kind of works together. It's great to see public and private working together. Um, getting back, how much is a monthly tri-rail ticket? Do you know? Uh, uh,
I'll
yeah,
know in a
yeah,
minute.
yeah, yeah.
I will look it up on our
No,
convenient
I
app
was just,
because I don't do
yeah,
the
right.
monthly.
No, I understand. So,
I'm a
because
rider, but
I'll tell you, I was impressed. I mean, when you know, you hear things, and to your point, going on at once and learning that and it becomes somewhat familiar and comfortable, that you are making that trip and whatnot. It tends to bring you back, right? It tends to say, all right, well, this is an option now, because we tend to kind of ignore what we don't know, and certainly if we're not comfortable in riding a train or whatnot, when we say, oh, like you said, you gotta go on the app or go on the website, you gotta purchase your ticket, you gotta get there, you gotta go on it. And once you go on it, well, now you know how to do it. Now you know the process. So it becomes easier, and it becomes, more you know, uh accessible, and certainly it enters your mind when you're making a trip, or somewhere. And certainly I mean, driving in traffic, even driving from West Boca to East Boca is crazy, let alone going from, Boca to Miami.
absolutely, and that doesn't even take into account that when you're on the train, you can get some work done. You can just go on your phone and you do it. You could do a crossword puzzle. You do whatever
Right.
you want without the stress and the burden and the time commitment that it takes to actually drive to the different locations. So a regional monthly pass on Trirail, which is good for unlimited travel through uh, the entire Trirail system. Uh, for full fare is $155. So this will be good for the our system and the Metro Rail and Miami system. Um, is $155, but typically, if you're working for an employer who signs up for our employee discount program, and we're very aggressive in signing employers up, and you can be a huge company or three people, that will reduce it. So that reduces it to 131.75 for the month. And then, of course, students, children, seniors is even lower at $77.50 for a month of unlimited travel.
That's amazing, because if you think about it, you go ahead and spend that $131, and you can, I mean, right now to fill your tank is almost $131. And you're using it every 4 or 5 days or a week, kind of thing. So yeah, that's pretty
But
amazing.
even an individual ticket, we'll have $5 tickets on the weekends where you for $5 you could just ride all day on a Saturday or on a Sunday.
So, what are some upgrades? What are things coming to Tri-Rail and the transit? Is there things that some exciting things that kind of whets our appetite? Because I know that Brightline is stationed supposedly by the end of the year in Boca. We'll see. It might go into the first part of next year. We'll see. And then Aventura. So they'll have Boca, Aventura, Miami, West Palm, and then ultimately Orlando next year ish. Yeah.
Correct. And actually, there will be at the Boca Station a platform for that coastal link commuter rail service that we in South Florida would hope to provide in the future. At Tri-Rail, as I mentioned, we're trying to upgrade our fleet. We're 33 years old, and some of our trains are also 33 years old. So we're embarking on a program to uh, overhaul existing trains and to actually purchase new uh, cars. So that will be something to look forward to in the future. As mentioned, our down we're uh, al- we're at seeing the light at the end of the tunnel of uh, that service into downtown Miami. So you'd have a one-stop ride from uh, Palm Beach County and Broward County directly into downtown Miami. So that will be a
We're
great
we're
convenience
we're in downtown
at
Miami
the Bright Line
at the
station
Bright Line. Okay,
in downtown, and
nice. Yep.
they have provided a us with a platform at their station, which may be some of the controversy that you were alluding to. Other
Mhm.
than that, people really don't have raised their eyebrows too much. But that has been controversial as to the platform that was provided to uh, Tri-Rail at the Miami Central Station, which is being corrected as we speak to enable our trains to come into the station. And here in Palm Beach County, I mean, one vision that I'm working on that I have for the future in Palm Beach County is to ultimately connect to Jupiter. So right now, our trains stop at Mangonia Park, just north of West Palm Beach, where the tracks uh, where our corridor track veers off. It's the old seaboard track from 1926. When you get to Mangonia Park, it veers off to Lakeland or wherever it
Mhm.
goes. And so ultimately, what we'd like to see is uh, increased service on the on that corridor, and the next logical stop would be the Veterans Administration Hospital. And so we have a grant from the state to do a planning study to determine the feasibility of a stop there, and then in the future points beyond, hopefully to connect to the turnpike. And then, as mentioned, with on the commuter side on the FEC tracks, what would have to occur to provide what's called the Jupiter extension would be the access to the FEC corridor using that crossover that is constructed up there in West Palm Beach at Northwood to then proceed further north to uh, Palm Beach Gardens, and ultimately Jupiter on the FEC track. So those are the exciting future plans that we have. They are no doubt accent on future. They are uh, they are expensive to provide, and we talked a little about possible going to the public for a possible funding source, not just for that, but ultimately to provide funding for any number of transportation projects that
Sure.
relate beyond just commuter rail. Uh, and but clearly though, we have that future vision as mobility needs, as we mentioned, uh, become paramount here in South Florida.
Yeah, so I mean, listen, we've had an influx of people, of population, certainly from pre-pandemic to I don't know if you want to call it post-pandemic because it seems like it's an ongoing pandemic, but whatever it may be. For the last 2 years, we've seen, I don't know. I think I saw a figure 900 people a day coming to the state of Florida, and like 400 of those are coming to South Florida. So, you know, that's a lot of people over a course of 2.5 years. Certainly, exciting things, and we need to improve our obviously transit, which certainly between Brightline and Tri-Rail we've been doing. And it's amazing because you know people have said, oh, I want the old Boca back, right? I want I want to be able to drive west to east in a few minutes, and and the traffic is, well, I mean, the what's the reason? Well, to combat that is the transit, and be able to use the tri-rail more frequently, and certainly Brightline more frequently if you need less stops and whatnot. So,
Well, we know there's demand for it because just in during my tenure as executive director, and I've been involved with Tri-Rail for 12 years actually, in roles including chairman and executive director. Uh, but just from 2018, when I assumed the role of executive director, we've seen Tri-Rail go from the 14th largest commuter railroad in the country now up to the 10th largest. In fact, coming out of the pandemic, we had the biggest comeback, the second biggest comeback after Denver of any commuter railroad in the country. And a lot of that is because, yes, people are moving here, but we still are in South Florida very much a service economy, a tourism based economy, as we all know. And those jobs, you can't zoom those jobs from home. You need as a worker in our economy down here in South Florida to be able to get to the work site, whether it's a construction site, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a restaurant. You can't do those jobs from home, and so there's even now greater demand for our service, and you see that in our ridership.
That's awesome. So I always end the show on two questions, and maybe you can enlighten me. Right. The first question is, what's your favorite streaming series of all time? You know, like through Netflix, Hulu. You know, if you watch TV, you can go with a movie if you prefer. And what are you currently watching?
Well, my daughter who lives in Brooklyn but has been home for the past week has usually has been watching all kinds of shows that I wouldn't otherwise watch. So I'll have to think the good place. So I'm watching that right now.
The Good Place. Okay.
Yes.
Where do you know where that's streamed?
So I don't
All
know,
right.
but I can look
No,
that
it's
one
all
up
right.
too.
No, it's all right. It's all right. And what's your favorite all
Uh,
time?
Well,
Either movie,
right. I
series,
mean, look, I'm an HBO fan,
right?
you know, you'd have to say if you're an HBO fan that and a guy that The Sopranos are the best show of all time as far as a series.
Love it. Well, Steve, I can't thank you enough for all you do for Boca, for South Florida. You really have put in your work, your community service work, certainly in giving back, and we certainly appreciate it. I don't know that it's always said, but I think it's amazing what you do. And thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and thank you for getting the word out. Your
Oh,
podcast is very valuable.
well, I appreciate it. Listen, Breakfast with the Broker every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. We have another special guest next week. We believe he'll be in studio, so we'll see. It's Boca July because we're gonna go do thing all Boca. So Breakfast with the Broker at 9 a.m. And if you are looking for a podcast and look for a studio, Pop, oh my God, Pod Populi is certainly a studio that you should take a look at to really advance your podcast and go forward. They do a great job. So look at a studio near you. Talk to you soon. Breakfast with the Broker at 9 a.m. Tuesdays.